I have to tell you, this week has been a tremendous week for the Republic. Rand Paul has come out of the gate, and he has come out running hard. I mean, he has really made an incredible impression in America in this last week. And the latest polling shows from Quinnipiac that he is now beating Hillary Clinton in 3 different states that they polled. Iowa, Colorado, and where was the other one?
He's slightly behind in Virginia.
In just a few days. His speech, as we have said earlier this week, I think is one of the best political speeches I have seen in a very, very long time. He is coming out of the gate really strong. He's joining us now. Senator, how are you, sir?
Very good, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You must be torn because in some ways this has been a really great week. In other ways, the press is really starting to show themselves. And, I mean, even Fox was hammering you. I should say Hannity wasn't. But some of the other shows on Fox were hammering you, and you have done an expert job of being very kind, being very gentle, but putting people in their place. What you did with Debbie Wasserman Schultz was genius. Genius.
Yeah, the thing is, they say that if you're over the target, you draw flack, and I think the fact that we've pulled ahead of Clinton in some of these purple states shows that we can get independent vote, shows that we can have the winnability it takes, to win not only the nomination, but to win in the fall. And I think that scares people who are for the status quo, people who, there are people on both sides. There are people on the right who want to spend a lot of money we don't have. There's people on the left who want to spend a lot of money we don't have. And typically what happens in Washington is they get together behind closed doors and they just spend us into oblivion. So we borrow $1 million a minute because both sides really, truly don't care about the debt, and they're afraid of someone like me who would actually balance the budget.
Senator, how do you respond to people who would say, because I think I know you well enough to know that you mean what you say, and you will do these things, but when you get into the domestic spying, you said in your speech that on day number 1, you will revoke that executive order and you will stop the spying on Americans. What do you say to people who would then, is the minute we would get hit, and we're going to get hit one way or another, I mean, it's just a matter of time before something happens, whether we're spying or not. What would you say to people who say, well, it's your fault? Because that's what will happen.
Well, the thing is people say this about the Patriot Act. I tried to get rid of the Patriot Act because I think it turns the Constitution upside down. And people said, well, what would you rely on? And I said, well, couldn't we just for a moment, couldn't we for a day rely on the Constitution? The same way with the spying program. I'm not saying don't use intelligence. I think we should use our intelligence to find out about people who might attack us. So if you're here and you moved here from Pakistan or moved here from Yemen last year and you're calling people back in Yemen and you're plotting and we have evidence, we should look at your phone records. If your phone records include 20 people you called in the country and in Yemen and there's suspicion, you take it to a judge. Look at their phone records. I don't care if you go 20 hops into the material looking for people who are terrorists. I just want you to ask a judge, and I want you to put an individual's name on the warrant. What I object to is the warrant that Snowden revealed said Verizon on it. I don't know anybody named Mr. Verizon, and Mr. Verizon doesn't have possession of hundreds of millions of phone calls that he has the right to divulge. You need to have warrants that are individualized. This was a big deal. I just finished reading Mike Lee's take on this. Have you seen Mike Lee's new book that's out?
Oh, yes, I have.
Yeah, and in the book he tells the story of John Wilkes, which is a great story about his opposition to the king because the king came after him without a warrant with his name on. And this is what, began this whole history of the Fourth Amendment, that we would individualize the king, the government, no matter who it was, had to have your name on a warrant. There couldn't be a blanket warrant for just anybody's stuff.
Okay, let's have, first of all, let me tell you something. This has been such a good week for you. I'm a big supporter of Ted Cruz, but I'm a big supporter of yours as well. Pat is not so much in your camp, but he would vote for you clearly. But this has been such a good week. I came into work this morning, and he was singing your praises. He was saying, boy, he is just hitting it out of the park. I mean, you have been incredible, just incredible.
Yeah, the speech was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
And the way you've handled the press, I think, Senator Paul, has been
phenomenal.
Phenomenal. You're not just rolling over, and that's what they expect you to do. They expect you to just roll over and play dead every time they come after you and start in with this, well, you're mean to women, or you shushed a reporter, or you.
Oh, stop
They
it.
expect you not to defend yourself, and
you're doing it in a real normal way. I think you're sweeping. But let me ask you a couple of hard questions, because there are many fans of our show that have concerns, and they just want to hear you speak on it, on things like Israel and ISIS, because everybody just assumes that a libertarian is just not going to get involved at all. So can you speak just on first Israel and then what you would do on ISIS?
You know, after I was elected, my wife and my kids and I traveled to Israel. We traveled with, a dozen or so evangelical ministers, and a lot of the trip was organized by a good friend of ours, and also supported by a doctor friend of mine who is Jewish that helped to get the thing going. And it was an amazing trip. And I think the one thing you come away from it knowing is that people in Israel know that America's their friend. You see our flag flying over there. You don't see anybody in Israel burning our flag. And I came back really even more so appreciative of the alliance that we have. And I'm always conscious of that. I've been conscious of that through 5 years in the Senate, through my voting record. I've supported Iron Dome and other money to help Israel defend itself. And so I think really there hasn't been anything. In fact, I've been one who's actually introduced freestanding legislation called Stand With Israel Act. And in it, I say that as long as Hamas is allied with the Palestinian Authority, that they shouldn't get any of our money. We send about $400 million to the Palestinian Authority each year from the U.S. taxpayer, which I find objectionable, but I find doubly objectionable that now that Hamas is allied with them, that perhaps indirectly this money could be buying missiles that are being lobbed against Israel. So I think I've been pretty hardcore in my support of our alliance.
Okay, so tell me now where you stand on Iraq and what the president is doing in Iraq. I'm sorry, not Iraq, Iran, with the alliance.
With the negotiations, I voted for sanctions against Iran on multiple occasions, and the goal for me is to bring them to the negotiating table. So I'm not one who says we shouldn't negotiate. I'm one who says that even Ronald Reagan, who was considered by many to be the greatest Republican president of recent history, he did talk to the Russians. He did negotiate, but he negotiated from a position of strength. And I think that's the problem, really, with the president, is that negotiations don't appear to be from a position of strength. With the most recent releases, we haven't seen the agreement yet, but what we're seeing is descriptions or preliminary descriptions of the agreement. And I think what troubles me most is that you've got the foreign minister of Iran, Zarif, putting out tweets in English describing the agreement as something completely the opposite of what the Obama administration is saying. And I think if they're on that much of a different wavelength, it makes me doubt the credibility and the sincerity of the Iranians going into this. I've also signed on to the Corker bill and worked with Senator Corker on this bill for 4 months. And this bill says that any agreement that undoes a U.S. law or undoes U.S. sanctions has to be approved by Congress. So I think my positions are really right within the mainstream, and those who try to sort of push me out to some level in another zone are basically just competitors who will lie, cheat, and steal to do anything to try to win office, and that's nothing new in America.
So let me tell you something that I really wrestle with as a libertarian, that I don't want to be everywhere. Pat and I talk about this all the time. We used to be real gung-ho. We were stupid. We were real gung-ho. Let's go and, save the world and everything else. And We can't do that, and we shouldn't do that. And for us to try to nation build or spread democracy around the world, nobody's going to listen to it when you're spreading it the way we spread it. We should just live our lives and be a shining city on the hill and be an example, and people will want to be like us. With that being said, when you see something like ISIS happening, and there is the beginning of a Christian Holocaust that is going on over in the Middle East, ISIS is everything I warned about at Fox, and it's happening. We have to either be in or out on that. Where is the national interest in that, and where is the line to say we have to stop this?
The reasoning that I use to come to the conclusion that we do have to do something about it is exactly the same reason why I've criticized Hillary Clinton for 2 or 3 years now on failing to defend our consulate in Benghazi. One legitimate American interest we have around the world is our diplomatic missions. And if we're not going to defend our diplomatic missions, I think anybody who wouldn't do that, I think, doesn't deserve to be commander-in-chief. And that's why I think really Hillary Clinton disqualifies herself. But now we have an embassy or a consulate in Erbil. We have an embassy in Baghdad. And as ISIS made advancements out of Syria and into Iraq, I became aware and conscious of the fact that, you know what, our consulate could fall. This could be something 10 times worse than Benghazi, and that if we're going to have it there, we've got to defend it. And that's when I decided that, yes, we do have to do something about ISIS. But going back even before that, I would say we have to understand how ISIS became strong and what we may have done that inadvertently helped them to become strong. I think funneling 600 tons worth of weapons into Syria in favor of the Islamic rebels indiscriminately, and often weapons that wound up in the hands of ISIS made ISIS rebels indiscriminately, and often weapons that wound up in the hands of ISIS made ISIS take over in Syria. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Syrian Christians. There are more Christians in Syria than any other place in the Middle East other than Egypt. Nearly 2 million Christians still live there. And the thing is if you ask them, who would you rather have in charge of your government, Assad or ISIS? There's no question they'll tell you Assad. Assad actually has let them live and has not persecuted them, but they know what will happen under ISIS. That doesn't make Assad a good guy. It just means it's a lesser of evils. But really we need to be conscious of the fact that the Christians are trapped in the middle, and we've got, crazy, bombastic people in our party that want to bomb both sides of that war. They want to bomb Assad and ISIS simultaneously. But I have favored military action against ISIS. I do think, though, in the long war over there between Sunni and Shia, between radical Sunni and the rest of the world and the rest of Islam, that the ultimate victory only comes when civilized Islam steps up. Yep. So I've been clamoring for boots on the ground, but I want to see the Saudis leading every brigade. I want to see 10,000 Saudi Arabians carrying muskets marching forth instead of funding radical madrasas, and instead of creating the problem, Saudis, Qataris, Kuwaitis, Turks, Iraqis, they all need to be fighting it. And it annoys me that they want us to go back in there and fight their battles. I'm more than willing to help, but I'm not interested in sending 500,000 Americans back in to fight for Mosul if the local people aren't willing to fight for it themselves.
Senator Rand Paul, do we have you for a few minutes? I have to take a break. Do we have you for a couple more minutes?
I can do one more section.
Okay, good. We'll be back in just a second.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Senator Rand Paul is with us. Tremendous week for him. The polls now show him leading and beating Hillary Clinton head-to-head. I want to ask you a couple of questions. You just committed to, if you saw the Saudis and everybody else in the region with boots on the ground and really committed to it, that you would put boots on the ground. Could I ask you and go one step further?
Well, that's not exactly what I said. What I said is I do think that the boots on the ground need to be Arab boots on the ground, and I've not been opposed to us being there helping, mostly through air power and some people on the ground. But I don't really want to see 50,000, 100,000 troops back in there, us fighting the battles. I want to see us in an ancillary role, and the civilized Islam and the Arab troops need to be fighting, and that's really what I want to see us assist in. But this isn't something that I want to see, 500,000 American troops back over there.
Okay. So is there any point at which you would commit ground forces to defeat ISIS? Is there any red line in the sand that they could cross that would...
I hate to get into
I don't think
hypotheticals.
it's best to sort of say one way or the other because, never's a long time, for saying one way or the other.
Could I ask you this? Would a Paul presidency, if a red line was ever crossed, and it doesn't have to be ISIS, anything, we decide we have to go to war, are we going to piddly ass around the way we have in the last 10 years, or are you a fight to win with all we have and then come home?
I'm definitely one who says we adhere to the Constitution first, and then if we have to fight, we fight to win and we come home. Absolutely. And that's the biggest problem with the president piddling around is that instead of going on TV, he should have come to a joint Congress, a joint session of Congress, and he should have asked for permission. And I told him this over Syria. I told him this again over when ISIS became a threat. He actually could have come out looking like a leader had he come to Congress, laid out the plan, and asked for a vote. Because the bottom line is that many, even those of us like myself who are reluctant to get back in the Middle East, would have in all likelihood taken up the challenge and voted for a use of authorization of force. But he didn't do it the right way. Like everything else, he thinks that he is omnipotent and has power to do whatever he wishes without legislative authority, whether it's health care, immigration, war powers. He just simply does what he wants.
You know what I really liked about your speech is you did not make it about him. You made it about principles, which I think is sorely needed. You'd be the first person that would have libertarian principles as president of the United States since maybe Grover Cleveland, maybe 100 years ago. Who's the last guy that you would say was the president that had your kind of principles?
One of the great things about Grover Cleveland is he really stood up to the special interests, and there are some wonderful quotes from Grover Cleveland standing up not only when he was in New York, but then when he became president, standing up to special interest. And really there's a lot that's going on in Washington, and one of the things I've been saying repeatedly is I'll cut all the corporate welfare. I'll cut every last penny of corporate welfare before I'll touch a penny of safety net. Because the thing is that the American people need to know that it's not the piggy bank up there for the wealthy. And this is going on with both parties. I mean, the president, nobody's really exposed this as much as it should have, how President Obama has basically doled out money to his rich donors. Republicans have done it too, but you could get rid of the Department of Commerce tomorrow and no one would know it. $40 billion saved overnight. No one would know it was gone.
Would you abolish the Department of Education?
Yes. Send it all back to the states. There's no reason to have a federal Department of Education. This is going to be a big issue. People are talking about Common Core, but it's more than just Common Core. This has been an issue between sort of the Reagan Republicans and the Bush Republicans for a long time, because Reagan was for eliminating it, and then when George W. Bush was elected in 2000, not only did they take it out of the platform, but they doubled the size of the Department of Education through No Child Left Behind.
Senator, I'm up against a hard break. I'm sorry. Senator Rand Paul would love to have you back again.
Glenn